location. Instead of going and jumping right into doing backyard delivery, which has a number of challenges, we thought, why don't we go to a place where there's already a congregation of customers? And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But let's show a video. I hope it's working. Slide 2. This goes over our Iceland operations. Yeah, so Flytrex was founded in 2013. Originally, the company was founded to create black boxes for consumer drones so they can compete, so friends could compete against one another and track one another's flight. But really quickly, the company learned that package delivery for food was going to be a major market. So the company pivoted in 2015 and started working on a flight control system, a command and control system that could be user-friendly for drone delivery. So that's a very important point to point out, that we're a aircraft agnostic technology company that's trying to enable drone delivery operations that are very safe. So we focus on the consumer-facing app, the flight control software, and also the route planning and such. In 2017, we launched the Reykjavik, partnered with AHA and the local Civil Aviation Authority, that's ISTRA. Currently, we're conducting operations on a daily basis on 14 delivery routes. The longest route is 4.3 miles, so that's beyond visual line of sight, without visual observers. And then just this past May, we got approved to do backyard deliveries. So we're signing up consumers to approve backyard deliveries right to their home. Again, touching upon is September 18. That's when we moved our operations into the US under Part 107. Fully compliant with the FAA. We actually had a FSDO come up and was curious about how we were approaching that problem. And we passed that inspection with flying colors. So next slide. So again, Basil touched upon it. We're part of the North Carolina Integration Pilot Program. We had the town of Holly Springs actually reach out to us. They're a very significant partner on this. They've worked with us on public engagement, getting meetings together where I can talk to the city council and get approval. Also, we've hosted a number of public engagement meetings where we have actual townspeople come in and talk to us about our operations, so we can answer some of those challenging questions like, are you gonna have a camera on board? Are you gonna fly over my home? It's really important that the IPP is focused on this so that we can get that integration and make the consumers and make the people more comfortable with the technology, because it's coming really, really fast. And if we don't engage it properly, then we can have a lot of pushback. So we're constantly hosting public engagement events, and we're gonna continue working with residents. And I can talk a little bit more about how the residents are directly engaged with our operation. Next slide. Thank you.
That's great. Well, thank you for that presentation. And again, we wanted to put this up on the screen so you could see it, and the diversity of operations, infrastructure inspections, delivering products, and across a wide array of use cases, safety inspections. All that we can do with drones is really, it's up to the imaginations of the people here on stage and out in the audience, coming up with the next new big idea. Big shout out to our tech support team for handling all of our videos and slide decks and all that. I give them a shout out also because they're standing by to collect your questions as part of our Poll Everywhere app. I've got a sheet of questions here that we can work through, and believe me, they're great. But often the best questions come from the floor. So welcome you to contribute to the conversation that way. All of you are really, just as we've discussed, at the forefront of drone operations. You're IPP participants, pushing out from where you could ordinarily operate under the regs, which have been advancing. Can you give us a little bit of sense of your experiences, some of the biggest challenges you've come across, whether they're technical or not, breakthroughs, surprises, and particularly for the IPP participants, how has the IPP helped enable these new innovative operations, whereas before you hadn't been able to do it?
I can take that first.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we learned really quickly is that the FAA is truly, truly engaged. I can't speak highly enough for Rachel and her team being our program manager for really guiding us down the regulatory path to make sure that we're checking all the boxes. As I said earlier, we're a technology agnostic partner. We're enabling operators. We partnered with a company called Aviation Services. They're a Part 135 jet charter service in North Carolina, and they operate out of RDU. They've been in business for 50 years. So they've been dealing with Part 135 regulations, Part 91 regulations for many, many years. And one of the first things that they said was, this is not my grandfather's FAA that we're dealing with. And it has been echoed time and time again that the surprising part is really all the partners coming together and working together to really solve all the problems and answer all the questions. At the last focus meeting, I talked about really this IPP is a great opportunity to have all the, I'd call them the all-stars. All of these companies are really engaged in investing time and money into helping pave the way for the future for unmanned aircraft systems in the national airspace. So
that's great.
It's been terrific.
So I'll just add that, I agree with that. We've had a very similar experience working with the FAA. They've been fantastic through this process. But as far as like surprises, things that have surprised me the most about this particular application has really been the community response. I mean, we live in rural Blacksburg, Virginia, and the response has been overwhelmingly positive, overwhelmingly. We knocked on many doors when we first started doing the initial routes, and it was like every single one was unanimously supportive and receptive to it. The only complaints we got were, why aren't you delivering to my house? I'm going to somebody else's house. And so the community is excited about the technology. They have a lot of questions, but that surprised me with just how excited. I will share a quick story that I had a discussion with my daughter, my 9-year-old, and asked her, what does it feel like to be a part of history? And she said, Dad, this is just normal. This is the norm thing. And that new generation views this technology very, very differently than what some of the older generation does. But even them, they're still excited about it. It's the talk of the town, and it's all been positive. So that's been quite the surprise.
That's great.
We've been really excited to be part of the IPP. And as Wes noted, definitely it's not your grandfather's FAA anymore. And so the engagement has been just the most beneficial part. As you know, there was no funding associated with this. And so, our leadership within our state said, well, why are we participating in this again? And so we told them, well, it's really, we have this access to FAA that is really unique to this program, and we can really work together and brainstorm and sit down at a table and figure out the safety cases, because that's what our focus is collecting data to help with future rulemaking to really enable these complex operations that we're doing in our respective sites throughout the entire country. So we've been really excited about that engagement, and again, a week doesn't go by, maybe even sometimes a day doesn't go by, I don't know if this is in your case, but a phone call from our PM saying, hey, where are we at on this? So just constant engagement. And if you guys think about the flip side, before the IPP submit a waiver, and it was a waiting game. And so this is really exciting to be a part of this and have that engagement.
Right.
Yeah, I think Basil summed it up, night and day difference compared to what it was before.
That's great. Well, I do have a question from the audience that gets right into a little bit more of the weeds here, and it fits in with this discussion. I want to get a little bit more into what operating certificates or waivers or authorities are you leveraging in order to carry out these operations? I'm sure some in the audience who aren't yet operating but have that idea are looking for a little bit of a roadmap as to how to enable their operations, and I'd love to hear from each of the panelists who want to engage. What are the pathways that you've pursued that you think are successful to enable these operations?
Yeah, well, the UAS office made a determination pretty early on in the program that Part 135 was going to be the roadmap for cargo transportation. And one of the ways that it was explained to me that I think makes sense is that even though a lot of the regs don't really apply to unmanned aircraft, it at least gives us all the checklist that we need to go through. So if you tried to do it under, for example, Part 107, it wasn't clear what was going to be required, and so even though it's a fairly onerous and arduous process, at least it's a process. And we now have already the first applicant that's made it through it, shows that it can be done, and there are a lot of things that obviously had to be waived or exempted, but it's a process, and that definitely is progress, and we've now got something to go through, and that's what we're doing.
Let's talk a little bit about your experience under 107. You highlighted that as part of your
Yeah, so the 107 here in the U.S., again, we know we couldn't fly beyond visual line of sight without kicking over the Part 135. The reason why the North Dakota project was so successful is just because it was open, right? We had leveraged a waterway and hazard ways on the golf course, and there was no trees, so we were able to maintain line of sight. But that helped us identify maybe our approach with 135. So the crawl, walk, run approach. Yes, we're looking to obtain a waiver to operate over people, but that's just across the highway. Again, we're planning our routes very strategically so we don't have to put other people at risk. All of our routes, I think 92.5% of our entire route is over trees, and that's the way we're going to scale it. We're thinking about our routes very methodically so that we avoid the risk of people. So we're starting with 107, using the philosophies and the methodologies that we did for those and shifting those into 135 so we can mitigate the risk. But yeah, as Lawrence said, and Part 135 serves as a framework for the FAA and for us to identify what things need to be complied with, but maybe what rules need to be developed that do fit UAS operations. And that's what we're finding too with our development of the petition, is just identifying all of those rules that don't exist for UAS and helping shape that framework.
So a lot of talk about 135. Mark, you're up. What does it take to get the 135 certificate in your cooperation with Wing, and what does that mean for operations going forward?
Yeah, so first of all, we started out with 107 as well, and 107 waivers, which are all up on the website. Our operations beyond line of sight and over people, all that to collect the data and do the testing needed to show performance to the 135 requirements. So what did it take to get the 135? I'll be honest, I was not in the daily grind of actually writing all the documentation. I'll say it's a lot of documentation, and I think Margaret summed it up well yesterday. Their mantra is say what you're going to do and then do what you say. So and put that down on paper, and put it down on paper early on. What 135 really is just a very heavy documentation of all the ways that you function, what the crew roles are, the responsibilities, how you do maintenance. And to me, to sum it up, it looks much more like a traditional aviation operation for a charter aircraft company or something like that. It's very, very similar to that. So to me, what it means going forward is we're seeing a move from a relatively simple, or I was going to say a lot of freedom under Part 107 to do whatever you want, to a much more structured, organized process that looks like a manned aviation type of regulation and operation. So when I look at the future of the 135 operations and what we're seeing, I see something that looks very similar to what we've seen all across the country for decades. And for us, it's been interesting on our side, just seeing how the processes have come together and all the terminology rings true to traditional aviation lingo. And so the drones are growing up, I would say. That's the way I see this.
Yeah.
One thing I'll add, so we have the 135 certificate, which is the unscheduled air carrier certificate, but we're also going through a process now to type certify our aircraft. So we're actually, certifying an aircraft that will be operated under that 135 certificate. And so in the interim, there's an exemption that will be used before we can really get through that type certification process. So really kind of two big chunks that we're breaking off and cutting our teeth on right now.
Great. Well, we got some great questions coming in from the audience. Keep them coming. I'm going to work them in. One last thing before we get away from some of the process questions. Now that you've gone through the process, how would you advise those in the room to learn about how to benefit from your hard work? A lot of what we're doing here as public agencies, as lead participants, is being sure that these are processes that can be repeated so that we can, as the title of this panel suggests, make it more routine. Let us know what are the things that, if you are an entrepreneur in this audience and you've got an idea, how would you go about figuring out what you learned from this process, and what can we do at the FAA to help get that information out to the public?
So we often get questions now. I've got a lot of startups that have been calling and saying, hey, I'm interested in doing drone delivery. Maybe they've seen a couple of videos, maybe some of the folks on the panel. And so now they're really motivated. And so one of my first questions is, all right, well, what do you know about aviation? And if there's not really any knowledge of aviation, that's the first place to start. And so, we're talking about a 135 operation, which has been around for a while, and there's a lot of structure, there's a lot of training that is going to go into that. And so sometimes it may seem or appear, very simple operation, but we're really butting off a lot to move to this routine, beyond visual line of sight package delivery operation. So one of the first things, of course, is at minimum understand Part 107 and what those regulations are, and then start looking at some of the other areas like Part 91, our commercial aircraft, 135, 121 operations. So a lot of education will help position them. And they're building a business case, right? In order for your business to thrive, you want to build a business case of where you're contributing either into that entire ecosystem, or maybe you'll be a zip line and you'll own a lot of that ecosystem.
I think an important part for us, we're an enabler. This is the technology partner. So we're enabling Kazi Aviation, i.e. Kazi Aviation Unmanned, to become an operator. So this is really important to us. In order for us to scale and to show other operators that it's possible, we're trying to develop the processes and the documentation and the flow to replicate that over and over and over again. So this process has been learning the Part 135, Part 43, and then the type certification process so we can have a replicated version in other states after the IPP. So that's very important for us as a company.
So I think that half of the learning is happening on the FAA side. And then I've said it in a few other panels that this has been a learning process for all. All of us are having to figure out how these work in the context of what the regulations currently are. So the first part of the lesson learned is that the FAA knows better now. As far as they have better information to be able to provide. So first of all, I would ask. I think you'll get more, we'll see more clearer and clearer, better guidance and better answers as we all learn well. And then we're also happy to share our lessons learned with any companies. And I think a lot of these points have been made here are very, very good. Do your homework. But there's lots of IPP partners, there's test sites, there's all kinds of expertise in the industry. And as we're all learning together, we'll share that more and get that into standards, get that into guidance to help them out.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark, you've been really good. I know at our IPP last focus meeting, sharing the risk assessment and how we look at a lot of the safety cases. So we do appreciate a lot of the IPP partners are talking with each other and trying to support each other as well.
Yeah, we try to share lessons learned wherever we can. We've done so at this conference as well.
That's great. Well, shifting gears a little bit, we talked a lot about some of the regulatory wickets you got to go through and kind of technical challenges that we overcome as we safely integrate drones into the national airspace system, complex airspace. But just a complex question, and some have touched on it from the audience and in your opening remarks, getting the public on your side, making sure that the public understands that drone operations can bring good things. It's nothing to be scared of. Is big a hurdle as the technical challenges. Would you share with us some of your perspectives of what you've encountered from public perception? Mark, you touched on it briefly, seeing some positives. One of the questions from the audience is, people sometimes, you wonder about what's that flying over your home or in your neighborhood. Would you give us a little bit of sense of what you're encountering out there as you operate in the United States? And then what are you doing, and what steps are you taking to be sure that you're able to contribute to a positive image of drones flying and offering services here in the United States?
Sure.
It's a lot there, so
yeah, if I can start
take it and run with it, sure.
Yeah. So what I find is the pushback that I do get, if any, is mostly lack of knowledge or understanding of what's going on. It's the proverbial, I don't want it flying over my pool taking pictures of me. When they understand what we're doing, those tend to vanish. It's the not knowing, why is that aircraft there, what is it doing, what value is it bringing, or is it just the neighborhood kid spying around? And so for us, it's been about education, and I do think the remote ID is a very huge part of this, and we're testing some remote ID concepts that we'll hopefully roll out with this program as well. So there's, it's sharing information, and that's kind of actually in the operations stage, but even before that, we need to talk to the community about what to expect. What is it going to look like? What does the timeline look like? There's like two limits here. You can either announce you're going to do drone delivery, and then if you wait too long, you're going to end up with people either upset because they're not getting their delivery yet, or they've now envisioned something that actually isn't really happening. So we want to communicate to them very clearly what we're doing, show them the technology, and get their feedback, and then show proactive response to it. So our forward-looking community engagement is going to look much more public, filling up meetings and going to malls or other events and just chatting with folks. But to me, it's all about education. Once they understand, it seems like most of the concerns are addressed in that way.
Community engagement is key. As a DOT, we know that it's important to engage with the community. Anytime we're building a new transportation infrastructure, whether it's airports or roads or a new rail corridor, and having sat in many outreach meetings, I'll tell you that most of the time in those, they don't come to the meeting to tell you that they love what you're doing. They're telling you, why are you putting this new intersection? There's nothing wrong. Why do I have a stoplight? And why does this roundabout here? And so we've used some traditional methods that we've had for public meetings in North Carolina with limited success. I think we have the folks that have shown up at those have really been encouraged and are excited to learn more, but we need to be able to have a mechanism to reach out to those that are that have a negative feedback. They're not going to want to spend the time to to drive over to an event like that. And so we've started, like other IPPs, to run an online survey so we can get some of that feedback and incorporate it. There's really kind of two things I'll quickly touch on. One is equity. Anytime there's a new technology, there's often a concern about, well, will I have access to that, or is this only going to be accessible by the wealthy? And so I think it's important, or it was important when we were looking at a proposal to focus on medical package delivery, because that is really benefiting improving healthcare outcomes for the entire community. And so that's really an easy operation to sell to the community. I think with food as well, we're all excited. We all have to eat, and so it's a part of our life. And we're seeing Uber Eats, other ways that they're moving food, and so this is just another technology. The second point that we often see come up is privacy. And James Grimbley from the Choctaw Nation really articulated this well, and he talked about privacy being really kind of three focuses that he's seen, and I think it's also true in North Carolina. And one is Big Brother. Well, this drone, what information is it capturing, and what is the government capturing? And the second is privacy, like peeping Tom, are they looking at me? And then the third is proximity, which often is kind of confused with privacy. This drone is near my house, and so that makes me nervous as well. And so a lot of those things we can address, as Mark noted, through education, because we're talking about the beneficial uses. And so one of the things we need to do is we need to really tell a story about how this is helping the community. And so whether that's improved health outcomes that you see in Rwanda translating to North Carolina, or greater accessibility to food for others through Flytrex, that's the story we want to get out to the community to get that positive feedback.
From an operational side, from companies that have got their brand name out there, what's your perspective?
I mean, I was faced with some pretty interesting comments on the golf course. I was out there standing on the tee box saying, hey, if you want some food right now and you don't want to wait for the beverage cart, you can actually order it right now and it'll be at the green. And so very quickly, people's minds were just blown that this was being offered at a golf course, and that it could be done so fast. So by the time the person got done playing a hole, the food was ready. We had one little girl, I think she was about 9 years old. For the entire project, about a month, she was on the golf course every day, just so she could order something from the drone. And so the app, we actually have a really great photo of her ordering it. She ran it every day. Her grandmother would bring it out on the course. So we have that side of it. And we've also actually found a lot of positivity on social media, right? Everybody likes to say those negative comments on the social media. So we've been really thoroughly engaging, like answering individual concerns about cameras and privacy and backyard deliveries very methodically. That way we're just being open and transparent and talking about our processes and talking about our policies so that people know. And I think that's really important, is being accountable as a company, that you're not servicing only your own needs and your own success, but the whole industry. So together we have to succeed and we have to approach this appropriately, because if we don't, it's going to look bad for the entire industry. So as a company, if you're accountable and you're transparent with certain things, so you can explain your processes and follow those processes, I think it would help in the long term.
That's great. Mark?
Yeah, I think from Zipline's perspective, although we're not currently operating commercially yet in the United States, we do operate and have done, thousands of, hundreds of thousands of hours of flights in California. And I think the privacy, concerns, are probably a little bit overblown. I think at the end of the day, probably the biggest driving factor for the public is safety, which is, I think, the primary focus of, appropriately, the FAA. And I think whenever you have, any form of transportation, it's going to have a certain amount of risk. And at the end of the day, I think the question the FAA is, has to decide, and is doing a good job through the IPP program, is balancing, the risk versus the benefit to society. And I think that, in our case, first of all, using a reliable system that we've proven with over, 19, I think actually we just exceeded 20,000 deliveries in Rwanda. So we have a tremendous amount of experience. Nobody ever injured with any of our flights. And certainly we found huge acceptance from the public in Rwanda. But I think even in the United States, at the end of the day, they're going to see this and understand that it's bringing huge value. It's better healthcare access, better healthcare outcomes, and the benefits will far exceed the risks.
Yeah, it's true. And Basil, you're right. People rarely show up to a government public meeting to hand deliver their thank you notes. But it's important to stand in those engagements and get the word out, both from governmental side and also companies being vocal and visible in their communities and being sure that what we're doing is regarded as a public benefit, not just a new way to gather your data. It's funny. People are worried about a camera on a drone, but you're carrying around 1 or 2 cameras in your pocket every single day, and kind of
and a tracking device.
That's right. They know exactly where you are. Keying off of a question that we got in from the audience and kind of turning to the public policy perspective a bit. Governments are expending resources both at the local level and state level and in the federal government, and companies are expending a lot of resources testing this out. Some smirk at what they regard as a novelty of delivering a burrito or a popsicle, and it's eating up a lot of regulatory time and attention. But you are spending real resources on this. You're dedicating time and effort on this. Can you share with us what you regard to be the market potential for expanded drone operations? I mean, this isn't just some kind of science project, right? Maybe from the business perspective first, and then learning what we are from the lead participants of the IPP.
Yeah, I think I can certainly speak for Zipline and our investors that, although we are a socially minded company and we're saving lives and we're very proud of that, we are a for-profit venture, and our investors are certainly looking for a return on their investment. So they see the market opportunity. We see the market opportunity. We think drone delivery is going to be huge. I think it's probably obvious why Amazon and Google, which are very large corporations and are investing a tremendous amount of resources in this. And I think it's very appropriate for the government to be doing it. I think one of the nice, very smart aspects of the IPP program was allowing the FAA to focus its relatively limited resources, especially on unmanned systems, on a relatively limited number of projects that allows us to all move faster. Because, as you know, obviously they were being overwhelmed by the number of waiver applications that have been coming in, and this is really allowing us all to move faster. So I think, it's a huge opportunity. It's a big opportunity all around the world, and it's great that the Department of Transportation and FAA are investing the time and resources to make sure that the United States doesn't fall behind other parts of the world like Rwanda, which actually is showing how it can be done.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that a typical delivery person can do about 3 deliveries an hour. If you can't do at least that, you're going to lose money. With a single aircraft, we can do 10 an hour. Just for example, our Holly Springs operation, we're leveraging the the challenges that DOT is dealing with in that town. The drive route from our facility to the place that we're doing delivery is 12 and a half minutes. But it's only 0.33 miles away as a crow flies. So we can do a delivery in 2 minutes versus a 12-minute flight or drive. So if you think about a family at the Ting Park is a soccer complex with a baseball stadium and tennis court. So if you think about a family there on the weekend watching a soccer game, in order to get that sunscreen or the food before you go home, you have to pick your kids up, put them in the car, and drive 12 minutes and back. That's a 30-minute round trip, also taking into consideration the logistics of getting out of the car and purchasing your food or whatever you're buying there from the Target. So we're trying to handle those logistics problems to solve the economics and the scalability of it. And so when we approach our operations initially in the US, we're looking at those opportunities where we can leverage the logistics challenges in the suburban areas so that we can do the deliveries where a typical driver and a couple thousand-pound car and a tired college kid can't do as efficiently. So that's
I mean, it gets right on it because the delivery, on-demand delivery marketplace is robust, and there are plenty of options, and it's neat to explore why a drone makes the big difference, and that's something we're learning a lot. Do either of you want to contribute?
Yeah, I'll mention there's tremendous opportunity to incorporate UAS into lines of business, into government within our communities, within our states. And so, focusing on something like package delivery really addresses a lot of different, a lot of different hurdles that we need to overcome to see full integration. We're going to be flying package deliveries beyond visual line of sight, which will apply to energy inspection or to search and rescue, a wide variety of things. Flying over people or moving traffic, again, another key enabler to really quite a lot of different missions there. The Part 135 process has really, raised the standard of training that we haven't seen, right? So under Part 107 to operate, we're taking a written test. There's actually no hands-on flying. So if we think about what if you told your 16-year-old, yep, you just got to take a written test, here's the keys to the car, you're good. That's kind of what we're doing under Part 107. And so we're learning a lot about training and what those training requirements are going to be required for these more robust operations. So I think there's definitely, I think it was a smart investment to focus on things like package delivery. And so maybe these burrito and popsicle deliveries don't seem like a lot, but really they're building this greater safety case that's going to support everybody.
So I'm being the one that the burrito and popsicle deliveries have happened at.
Yeah.
Let me just first start by saying that we have to deliver something. And if you can deliver some of these, like a popsicle, it's going to melt if you can't get it there fast. It's a very simple thing. And guess what? There was a little kid on the other end of the line. It's a great way to take something that will be of interest to the kid. Burritos, if you can deliver food, not disturb it, keep it at a temperature, you can do all those things. It's easy to deliver a cell phone or some of the good. So people get focused in on what it is. And I'll admit that I was initially a pretty big skeptic of the technology. I was like, there's no way I'm going to get into this. But then seeing it in real life, seeing, yes, doing the 17-minute drive and then showing a 2-minute delivery, been there, and it's amazing to see. And I just ask people to think about new ways that they will now interact with the world that you have not even thought about before. The example that I used to give, which I still love, it's not relevant to me anymore, but I've had instances where I've been in town with a little kid that was in diapers, which they're now all out of diapers, that's why it's not relevant, in diapers, and then find out that they had a dirty diaper and I forgot to bring the diaper bag. Yeah. And I would have paid $50 to $100 for a diaper at that point in time, let me just say.
That's pretty much you pay already for your diapers.
It is. Take some notes. But I mean, just, and then to have something you need urgently there on demand is a whole new experience, I think, for the community. And I think it will change the way we do interact with companies. Now, that's just the value side. What about the reduction in emissions and safety of pulling a multi-thousand-pound vehicle off the road? And how many times do I drive across town just to get food or to get some small object? And so I think it's one of those things, like, it's like my cell phone. I can't live without it now. And 10 or 15 years ago, I didn't know I needed one, kind of thing.
Well, count me among the believers in burritos.
Okay.
It's an important thing. Never underestimate the power, the purchasing power of the American stomach, right?
That's right.
But that really does capture a lot of the things that we deal with. Where this is going beyond simply the products or the issues or the products or the items that are being delivered. One thing I want to touch on in the last few minutes that we have, you're seeing these challenges of deconfliction occur and noise and other things. What do you think the promise is for what we'll learn from drone operations to eventually make safety improvements into the manned fleet that we regulate at the FAA?
That's a great question. And actually, I think, sorry, I should go here, but I think we're going to actually bring back a lot of technology to the manned side. And I know that in the aircraft cert office is looking at this very closely, looking at what technologies we can bring back. Low-cost, lightweight autopilots, safety mechanisms that are now standard and normal on drones. Maybe we can transfer some of those. We've had autopilots for years in manned aircraft, but they're very expensive. They're certified, I understand that. But I think there'll be many technology aspects that will go back to the manned world. But just having the easy button to push would be very nice as a manned pilot. And so I think we'll see a lot of the technology pieces go back, and I'm sure there'll be some policy points as well.
Yeah, our typical operation is under 400 feet, but when you think about just scaled operations for unmanned aircraft, they're going to be at all altitudes. And so the technologies that we're incorporating in unmanned systems are because there's no manned pilot to take over some of those things, those see and avoid aspects. So in order for full integration to happen, all of the systems must talk effectively together, and we must have a reliable system to do that see and avoid aspect because there isn't manned pilots on all the aircraft. So there's going to need to be a blend of technologies where maybe it's not compatible on manned, but we have an unmanned system that's brought onto a manned system, and now they can talk to each other. So
Yeah, to pick up on that, I mean, the GA aircraft that's flying around with often, sometimes without a transponder, Mark 1 eyeball looking forward, flying with a stick, is not exactly the most robust sense and avoid system that could be out there. And so I think that there's a lot of technology that will come out of this program, make it much lighter, much less expensive, and much more robust because of the magnitude of the amount of aircraft that will definitely be incorporated, hopefully will be incorporated into the GA aircraft. I think average age of the general aviation aircraft that's flying out there today is 40 years old. And they're not required to have transponders. So I'll put in a plug that, as we look at remote ID, it seems like that would be also a great place to look at incorporating technology that's going to be imposed on the unmanned aircraft systems to also hopefully incorporate that technology onto manned aircraft.
One of the things that the IPP has really enabled either states or local governments to now start contributing to this conversation. And so what we've seen kind of in the aviation space, especially with airport development, is maybe a flatlining at the federal level when it comes to spending and funding. And we're seeing states where we're seeing these first operations happen, we're contributing to that funding at the state level. And so it's really exciting for us in North Carolina to see that, we can start putting funding and resources toward this infrastructure that will help build up things that will help, like UTM, which will help with detect and avoid to really enable these operations and see the full benefit. So I think we'll start to see more state and local governments contributing funds to enable these in their respective communities.
Well, I think I'll bring our panel to a close, but I just really am excited at the policy discussions that we were able to have on stage, and it's really only scratching the surface of the work that's going on, both at the Departments of Transportation, within the companies, and all in cooperation together as a community to advance the state of the art, the safety of these systems, and to really unlock an economic opportunity. You talk about capabilities that come online. You're also talking about new brains that are being brought into the aviation industry. The first time in a long time we've seen such a draw to the aviation and aerospace sector. Maybe your 4-year-old will become one of our pilots and one of our entrepreneurs. That's to me, that's just personally exciting, and really appreciate all of your perspectives, taking the time to share with us today, and of course for all the work you're doing to make drone integration safe, reliable, and hopefully one day, real soon, routine. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
What doesn't kill you